From training to performing, join our big league conversation. Welcome to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast with your host, Eric Cressey.
Welcome back to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Cressey, and we're here with episode 15. We're going to dig really deep into the science of hitting and talk about how it's changed over the last 10 to 12 years with our guest today, both at the amateur levels and really more advanced at the professional level. We'll dig deeper on data-driven training on the hitting side and things that up-and-coming hitting coaches can really learn from a great practitioner that I've had an opportunity to get to know really well. Before we get to it, we're going to talk about our sponsor, the Pulley. This is an implement that we've really enjoyed using with our athletes of all ages and ability levels. And what I really like about the Pulley is its heavy focus on deceleration. Obviously, every strength and conditioning program that we use has a goal of improving performance and decreasing the chance of injuries, and really eccentric capabilities. The ability to decelerate is something that has a profound impact on both of these initiatives. With the Pulley, you're training hard to overcome inertia. So when you pull the cord on the concentric motion, you also have to be able to absorb the load, preserve your core stiffness, because the flywheel is really going to dish it right back to you eccentrically. So we'll use it for everything from rotator cuff training to rotational rows to anti-rotation work for our core stability stuff. Certainly there are a few flywheel inertia pieces on the market, but they don't let you train at any point along the force velocity curve, and most only allow you to do so in a vertical movement. What's nice about the Pulley is it allows you to train at any speed with any load and in any direction. So it really is a super versatile piece of equipment that we like to use for all sorts of different motions. With that said, they've actually set up a great 10% off coupon code through June 30th for our listeners. If you go to versapulley.com/Cressey10, again, that's Versapulley, VERSAPULLEY.com/Cressey, CRESSEY10. You can pick up that discount. Again, it's a great product that I've been turning on to in the last couple of years, and it's definitely been a useful addition to our training arsenal that we'll be using moving forward. So check them out at versapulley.com/Cressey. Today's guest is a hitting instructor who has worked with multiple Major League Baseball MVPs and All-Stars, as well as individuals from the high school and college ranks. He has a facility in New Hampshire called Tewksbary Hitting that he co-founded several years ago, and also runs a subscription-based website, hittingdaily.com, with over 500 pieces of content. He's the author of Elite Swing Mechanics and Be a Hitter. He's also a husband and has a second child on the way here in the next couple of weeks, so we definitely have young ones at home in common. We're really excited to welcome my friend Bobby Tewksbary.
All right, Bobby, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's quite an honor after the absolute flexing you've been doing with your guest list lately.
Well, it's funny
surreal
to say
to actually be on,
because we have to really start off by differentiating between Bobby Tewksbary and Bob Tewksbury. Can you please just inform our listeners that you are not, in fact, the same person?
Yep. So he's the pitching guy and sports side guy. I'm the hitting guy. Funny story about that is, for my entire life, we're both from New Hampshire, so every time my name got announced when I was growing up, I'd be like an 11-year-old all-star tournament, now batting Bobby Tewksbury. Either the catcher or the umpire would say, "Hey, any relation?" And I would always say no. And then he was actually my host dad when I played for the Concord Quarry Dogs in 2004. So I get to live with him for a summer, and awesome family, and keep in touch with him still. And every time something happens, I'll send him a screenshot of just somebody mixing us up. So it's been a long running joke at this point.
You guys can't escape each other as New Hampshire guys, right?
It's impossible. Yeah. Well, he's in Maine now, so
that's right.
He's
in my south
the way life should be. Yeah,
absolutely. I'm sure he's still living free or dying. That's the way to do it. So here we go. We're gonna kind of speak in broad sense right now. So I did your brief bio. We introduced the show, but I think it's good to at least discuss the path of how did you become the hitting resource that you are today. What were the steps from your playing career into your your post collegiate career, obviously into the private sector on the coaching side of things. What drew you to where you are today?
Yeah, so I was always incredibly passionate about baseball. That was always like just part of my life. I really was drawn to the game. I was always super passionate, always hardworking, always wanted to learn about the game. And as a player, I was I was a good player. I played Division I baseball. I was a player of the year in my conference. I am not a good athlete. I run my best. I think I ran a 7 flat 60. I'm maybe 5'11". I don't have major league tools, but I had a mind for the game, and I competed my butt off, and I worked really, really hard. So, as a player, I was extreme knob to ball, stay inside it, not so much squish the bug, but really like I focused on using my hands in all the cliche ways. And I could never hit a home run in batting practice. You can ask any of my college teammates, never once hit a home run in batting practice. I couldn't do it. And there were certain swings that I took in my career that were just different. I did hit home runs in games, but the swing felt different than what I would practice. So there was a disconnect there. So after my career ended, started to really look at the swing and study the swing. And there was a specific swing of Albert Pujols that really triggered like this aha moment of, wait a second, he's doing something that what I was doing. And we have to kind of even rewind even further, because we weren't walking around with iPhones in our pockets and taking video of everything. I think it was VHS. It was, mini DV. You had to put in your computer and convert stuff. It was really hard to see video frame by frame. So I started, collecting as much data as I could on the internet with animated GIFs and going out to games. I would bring cameras to major league games and record video, and really just try to build up this massive database to try to figure out what was going on, because clearly Albert Pujols is way better than me at hitting. So I just really spent a ton of time trying to learn and figure out what he was doing that I wasn't. And I always had those swings in the back of my head of like, I hit a home run at Harvard that just like to right center, that it was so surreal that I hit a ball that far, because I just couldn't do it. And the swing felt so different. And I refer to them as blackout swings because they just happened. They felt more like a reaction versus what I was trying to do. And, from that point, started writing, started just to figure out the pattern differences, and just started to get traction. And that's kind of how it all went down.
Absolutely. When you look back at, what you were doing, in your college years, right, when you had accidental homers and things like that, if you could actually think to it in like a coaching context, what are the things that you think you were doing wrong? Like, was it internal focus cues? Was it getting hung up on what, everyone had told you over the years you were supposed to do versus what you knew felt right? If you go back, are there a few kind of like subtle cues or even like overarching coaching strategies that you realized were just totally not the right fit?
So it's weird now to talk about it because the landscape has shifted so much. Like we weren't really allowed to talk about mechanics. I remember when I was in indie ball with the Worcester Tornadoes, and Chris and I, Calabello, we'd be sitting there talking about the swing, and veteran guys would be like, "What are you doing? You can't talk about that. You're going to go in a slump." It was like there was no information about the swing. There was like Ted Williams' book was out there, but that doesn't even really go into detail. We didn't have like this. There was just a huge void of knowledge about the swing. So I was taught, get your foot down early, swing down. I used to do the T drill where the front ball was lower than the back ball, and you'd chop down at it. The Tom Amansky videos like that was what we had, and there was no YouTube to go on there and try to figure it out yourself. It just that all of that infrastructure that exists now flat out wasn't there. So you kind of, if you had a coach, you had to take him, you take his instruction for what it was and do your best to execute. And there was just nothing more to it. There was no next step. It wasn't like I said earlier, there was no iPhone. It wasn't to get video. We had a camcorder in college, but even when we saw the video, we didn't know what we were looking at. We had no reference for what was good and bad. So like you would just go do it, and whatever you did, if it worked, then you were successful. And if it didn't work, like work harder. at the things that you were practicing. There was no depth to it. It was what it was.
It's interesting too. We had a conversation. We're recording this here on June 21st, so we're about 4 weeks into like our new intern class in Massachusetts. And on their first day, John O'Neill, our director of performance in Mass, literally pulled out a 22-page like intern. It was a semester curriculum, basically. Like, here are the things you're going to learn. Here's what you're going to watch. And they've already gone through like a 10-week online course. They've gotten videos. They've gone through our exercise database. And I just stopped him in the middle. I was like, I just need to tell you guys, like, you have it so much easier than I had it. Like, there was no YouTube. There was no like, hey, just go listen to a TED Talk when you want to learn about how to like coach people better. Like, there was nothing out there. And I mean, I graduated high school in '99. I think you're a little younger than me, right?
I was 2001. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I mean, I didn't send my first email until I got to college. It was completely.
I submitted a college resume on a floppy drive.
It's
What
incredible.
are you talking about?
Actually, Twisted Sister came on the radio today, and I said to one of our athletes, I was like, "Hey, this was my first record," and I don't think they even knew what a record was. So,
and the record scratched when you said it.
Exactly. We're definitely old, but it speaks to like this idea of like young coaches can be so good so young. I mean, you can be a 25, 26-year-old phenom if you're really willing to like put the work in. What took us a decade can sometimes take 2 or 3 years if you have the right mentors and you have the right work ethic. And it also speaks to the fact that like guys like us, I mean, we're 38 and 36. We can't get comfortable. Like, you really have to stay on top of everything because the landscape, like you just said, has changed dramatically over the last decade. So with that shift, let's talk about what it was, what it became, and what it now is. What do you see as the biggest difference now versus 5 years ago and 10 years ago?
I mean, the speed of everything is pretty dramatic. The speed at which information is passed and shared, and how quickly. I feel like each year there's a new hitting trend based on whoever wins the MVP. And it's interesting to see that, how like you go online, you start seeing hitters just shifting who they're going to try to hit. Like, there's a lack of authenticity, I think, with a lot of the mechanics. There's people, so many hitters are trying to execute a swing versus learning how to hit. And I think that's a problem. I think that's, you're missing out on a big aspect of what it means to be a successful hitter if you're doing that. Not to say that you shouldn't emulate, but there's so much more to it. And the way travel ball is now, the kids don't watch baseball anymore. They watch highlights. That's another big thing. They don't understand pitch sequencing. They don't understand the rules. They don't run hard. They don't back up bases. I went to a lot of high school games this year. I probably went to 20 high school games this spring, and I mean, it was bad. The fundamentals of the game are just not there. And the kids are more concerned about doing a bat flip that's going to show up on Instagram than like legging out a double.
The other one, I was actually talking with a friend about this is, so my business partner Brian and I talked about this, is you actually don't realize that kids have been completely desensitized to failure. They play so many games, they lose in the morning and they play in the afternoon, so it doesn't matter. And you look at social media, you can always highlight your best swing. You can always highlight your best throw. You can highlight the most weight you lifted. There's really no way that you can actually show in a bad light in many cases nowadays, especially when mom and dad are doing everything for you and paving the way. Like, how important is it for your athletes in your mind to experience failure? Like, to actually go out there and get punched in the mouth a little bit in November so that they can be better in February?
I mean, they should be seeking it. Yeah. They should be seeking failure. And so much of our training sessions are just imposing failure on kids with either speed or movement, or we're just trying to put them into physical positions that they can't succeed in as extremes, as constraints, because we need that component is so critical, especially in baseball. When they go to a tournament and they play 5 games, that mentality of like, oh, well, I have another game in a couple hours. If you're really trying to play pro ball and you don't get another game until tomorrow and you have to live with your over 4, it's tough. And the thing that I see is so many young kids, they they fall in love with the success that they have versus falling in love with the game.
That's good.
And that's kind of like a cliche thing that I say, but I just see it so many times, and I'm always afraid of kids who have success early.
Yeah.
And they like winning and they like being better than other people. And then when they face better competition, it's not fun anymore because they don't appreciate the nuances. They don't appreciate pushing through challenges. It's, well, I'm not getting hits anymore. They get to the big field and they're not hitting 37 home runs in a season, so they just give up.
No, it's a great
It's
point.
like not fun. And it's that part, especially with hitting where there's so much failure involved.
Mm-hmm.
It's you have to learn how to adjust so quickly and learn from your failure. And if you just shut down when failure happens, you're never going to make it. It's not in the cards.
Absolutely. So obviously technology is the big rage nowadays. Everybody wants data. Even fewer people actually know what to do with that data, to the point they probably get so much that they get overwhelmed and make the wrong decisions in some cases. How do we make data meaningful and utilize it to change our coaching with respect to hitting?
Yeah, there's a lot.
It's a loaded question.
Always, I love when people get data and the first thing they do is they put a picture on social media, unboxing it.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh yeah. And then you just don't hear from them for weeks because they're so overwhelmed and they have no idea what they're talking about and no idea what they're looking at because it's just new. I've been incredibly tech forward. I'm not as public about it. I like to, there's some technology I'm sitting on right now that I've been testing and working through that I've not been public at all about what I'm doing because it's not ready to be to public. This is some stuff. And when you get stuff, so K-Motion is one of my favorites right now. I've had hit tracks for a long time now. They're amazing. K-Motion is one of my favorites. I use Diamond Kinetics. I've consulted with them. But a tech like K-Motion, you get it, and it spits out all these graphs and charts. And I spent a solid 3 months just trying to figure out what they mean to me. I would do high-speed video and look at the charts and lefties, righties, young kids, old kids, pros, college, high school. I needed to really be diverse in my data set to understand what I was even looking at before. I wasn't even trying to teach with it. And, I always try to communicate that to people that come in and train with me, hey, we're going to get this new tech and we have no idea what this means. Mm-hmm. But we have to do things that we don't understand to gain new insights. So it is challenging. There's excitement with it, but making it meaningful, there requires so many connections. And if I just did an assessment today with a kid and his Diamond Kinetics numbers were I literally was laughing. I'm like, are you serious right now? They were so high. And we had done a physical screen with him and he was his internal, external mobility with his hips were so poor and he was getting so cut off with his swing because he just couldn't get through a ball. Mm-hmm. He couldn't move. So if you put his numbers up on a recruiting website, the coach is like, oh, this is great. Let's get him. His numbers are great. But he needs to address things to be able to hit because his bat path was being dramatically altered by his body. So there's so many factors. And every time you add a new element, it gets more complicated. So if you're testing routine, I'll typically have hit tracks, Diamond Kinetics, and K-Motion at the same time. So we're doing bat, body, and ball. It's a lot of stuff going on. And then the question is okay, well, if it's a high pitch versus a low pitch, can we use that data together? Inside, outside? What conditions are we actually looking for? And then how do you process that on the back end? Because you got a kid standing in front of you that you need to help in real time. Mm-hmm. That you're getting just this fire hose of data being thrown into the mix that you have to try to process and make meaningful, as you said. And it is really, really challenging, and it's exciting to try to work on that problem, but we got a long way to go. We got a long way to go.
Do you think the pendulum has even swung too far in like the opposite direction where we've all seen it, like that kid who comes in and dad is raving that he's got a 103 mile an hour exit velocity, and the kid is like a 5 o'clock rock star, and he goes 0 for the summer with maybe 1 home run in 37 games, where they don't have an ability to actually hit in the game, and they get so caught up in the data that they fail to appreciate that they actually have to face live pitching as well.
Yeah, I mean, it can happen with pitchers with velocity. It can happen with hitters with exit velocity. And, 60-yard dash time doesn't mean you can play baseball.
Yeah.
It means you're fast, but it doesn't mean you can play baseball. The way I look at it is there's some technology that is more for measuring, and there's some that's diagnostic. So, like exit velocity to me is just it's a measuring stick. It's what you're capable of. And I always tell kids, once you hit a ball a certain velocity, it doesn't matter anymore. Mm-hmm. Like if you can hit a ball 105, like so what?
Yep.
You've checked that box. It's time to move on to can you hit?
Yeah.
And certain kids can really hit, but they can't hit at 105. So the training needs to be varied for those kids. Like if I get a kid that can, smash 105 off a tee, which is absurd, mm-hmm. but he's making outs in games, then I need to do more simulated at bats. I need to get into his approach and talk to him about, pitches he can handle versus not handle and what he needs to do to prepare. And the kid that is a really good hitter, he might just need a strength program. He might need to work on his diet. He might need to do a overload underload program. There's a huge need to be more specific. And for me, that's what the data is used for. It helps us understand where kids need the most help.
Yeah.
And
do you see there's a progression where, like you take algebra in 8th grade, and then you have geometry as a freshman, and then it's, algebra 2, and then advanced math, then calculus, where you go through those. Do you have kind of a stepwise progression that you look at in your 12, 13, 14, 15, 16-year-olds as they work their way up, that you like to see, like certain boxes that are checked along the way of development?
There's certainly metrics that we look at that if you hit, so for Diamond Kinetics, if you hit impact momentum of 26 or higher, you're probably a D1 caliber type hitter mm-hmm. in terms of that metric. Mm-hmm. For hit tracks, like once you go 100, then you're hitting that. There's certain metrics that you can kind of say like, yeah, this is getting real. You could look at like 60-yard dash, yep. which is probably more positional yep. based on like if you're a center fielder versus a catcher, it's different. It's hard to build levels like that or steps or grades like you would go through with school because everybody's coming from such a different background. Mm-hmm. And I think I don't know if you would call it the predispositions or, some kids are just naturally strong and there's way more nuance to that. Mm-hmm. And they're coming from different teams and they're coming from different backgrounds and different sports. So our first step is we just do an assessment and we just see where they're at.
Absolutely.
I have a tool that I've built that allows kids to track their games. Mm-hmm. So a goal with that is like I want a kid at the end of the season to be able to tell me how many 2-strike counts they got into. Mm-hmm. Like what percentage of your at-bats are you getting into 2-strike counts? Because if their swing looks good and they get to 2-strike counts all the time, they're not going to be successful. It's too hard to hit 2-strike counts, so their approach needs help. I think it has to be more assessment based because then you get like the 8-year-old that just has a knack for hitting. They know how to be on time. They know how to barrel the ball. And it would be more of a check the box approach than step 1, step 2, step 3 for me. I think it's it'd be nice. And the other factor is you don't know if you're going to have a kid for that long. Absolutely. Whether it's they're bouncing from team to team or the family's financial situation changes or whatever. There's so many factors in that piece.
Absolutely. In the strength and conditioning field, there's an old saying: it's easier to make a fast guy strong than it is to make a strong guy fast. So from like a somewhat physical projectability standpoint, you want that springy 6'3", 170-pound guy who can jump out of the gym. and you can put some body weight on him, you can put some muscle mass and strength in the right places, and good things are going to happen. Is there a hitting equivalent? I mean, do you look for like Joe Panic is one of our guys who has really good plate discipline, like strikes out about 10% of the time, which is really low by league standards. Like, do you chase a guy who seems to control the strike zone a little bit more than you chase the guy with the 110 mile an hour exit velocity with really raw power but no plate discipline? Is one easier than the other in your experience?
You want a hot take right now?
Yeah, do it.
I am very much teetering on whether I'm not sure you can teach hitting.
Okay. Elaborate.
Yeah, that's my hot take. So the ability to create timing, ability to command the strike zone, things like that. So all the guys that have made swing changes, like the cliche guys that have made swing changes, they've all been good hitters before they made swing changes. So like they got to the big leagues, but there was some glaring thing. They had holes that were mechanics driven, or there are guys that had they need to get stronger, things like that. But the guys that can hit, they hit everywhere they are. They just hit, like hitters hit, and I'm sure other people are going to disagree with me on this, but I think in the pro world it's probably easier because you have them every day. Like when you're dealing with a high school kid, they're in school most of the day, and then they're going to some practice where they're going to get 3 rounds of 5. Like the ability to train hitting in that environment is definitely not going to happen in a 1-hour lesson each week. So you need access to people so frequently, and there's different technology. If the VR stuff starts getting real, that could be a game changer for that, because then at least you're getting game speed more frequently without just beating up your body and beating up your hands. But the creating hitters is incredibly hard.
No doubt.
It's
especially when
incredibly
the pitchers are getting better and better every year.
Oh man.
Sorry, this is a pitcher dominant podcast. We're trying to bring the balance back to center.
Yeah. No, but it's incredibly challenging to teach timing. I feel like most good hitters, it's just inherent. It's just who they are. They understand how to do it and repeat it. Other hitters, they get in the box and their brain like spazzes. They try to do something different, or they don't process fast enough. And that's something that I would love to be able to measure better. Looking at processing speed of how quickly you can react to things. And there's companies that are doing stuff like that. That it could be very, very interesting. But I don't know how you develop it versus, it's natural. I spoke with, you probably know Tucker Frawley. He's at Yale.
Yeah, absolutely.
At ABCA, I sat down with him, and we were just talking about paying attention. And like, I'm not sure. I wrote an article about this on Hitting Daily. I don't know if like paying attention is like the ability to pay attention is like getting good grades in school. The people that are academically qualified to get into Yale, like that's a special academic kid, right? I think paying attention, the skill of paying attention in a baseball meaning, like where they pay attention to how the pitcher's getting people out. They know what they did last time. They know what they did, like 3 times ago when they faced them, like the Rolodex that major league guys have in their head. Yeah. The mental database that they've built up and can retain. I think that's absolutely like a skill, and I just don't think a lot of people are capable of it.
That's a really great point. Some people just recall things better, and obviously they recall things in real time when a ball is sailing at them at 98 miles an hour. So let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about up and coming hitting coaches. And we talked earlier about how the process to get to where they want to be is probably faster than ever before, and that's why you're seeing. And we have guys that basically hang them up and are employed by teams within 6 months. And they're basically coaching guys that were teammates the year before. So, what are some of the mistakes that you're seeing young hitting coaches make the most nowadays, and what are things they can do to offset those?
So it's a tricky question now, because that might depend on it might depend on what organization they're in, or there's a time and a place for mechanical stuff, and there's a time and a place for approach. Most of the guys that I've talked to in their hitting coaches, they want somebody that they can trust, that doesn't impose themselves on them, that will wait for the player to come to them to make changes. If you come at a guy and be like, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this, the player's going to shut down. If the player's had success, if they've got any history of success, they'll be like, mind your business, man. Like this, like I know what I'm doing. You have to. There's an element of being patient that I see some coaches are just really quick to throw their judgment out, and it turns people off.
Especially at the highest level, right? I mean, and
I had to do it. I had to learn it. I had to learn it myself because you get so excited and you want to tell people stuff, and you have to just be patient.
Yeah, and I've often told our pro guys to some degree, one of the more important lessons that you can learn, not just in professional baseball, but even to some degree in college or any level, you have to politely tell people, like, leave me alone. Like sometimes if you're playing professional baseball, you're already in the top 0.005% of people who have played this game. So when you get to that level, very rarely are we talking about an overhaul. It's more of a tinker or something like that makes people successful if there is a change that's needed. So, I'm sure you've run that a million times, but we see it so often where, we see guys who are drafted as, 4-seam change-up curveball guys, and all of a sudden they're throwing a 2-seam slider cutter within a year. It just doesn't always register. All right, so let's you kind of hinted at it, and this was actually my next question was, you mentioned that, understanding when to talk, mechanics versus talking actual strategy or approach. It kind of illustrates the need to understand the difference between like being an in-season hitting coach versus being an off-season hitting coach. Like they're markedly different things. What's your experience in both? Like what do you find yourself doing more of in-season versus the off-season?
My number one question in season is, how are you seeing the ball? Like, just how are you seeing the ball? Typically, you don't hear from people unless they're struggling.
Yep.
So you have to figure out why they're struggling. And sometimes it is mechanical, that they have, maybe they're falling back into old tendencies, or maybe their body's sore. Like, it's amazing how many times like, I'm not hitting the ball well. And it's like, all right, well, how are you seeing the ball? Seeing it great. Like, well, so anything going on like body wise? Like, oh yeah, man, I like tweaked my knee the other day. But that's, it's like, well, if you can't like trust your body, your brain's going to it's going to affect how you move. And the season is so long that it's like the ego in them will be like, oh, that's not it. I can just grind through it. But it's amazing how often that happens, or they'll sprain an ankle or their fingers jammed or something. And it's just funny how they won't acknowledge that as a reason, because you got to be tough. You got to battle through it. But in season, way more approach based. And off season, typically it's guys that want to make changes, and you don't get at bats in the off season. So one of my favorite things that happens is early fall. I'll have guys come in and they make changes, and they get to go play winter ball and go test it, because it's, they have to get the live at bats to stress test it. And that's a really, really, there's been a few guys that really, really was a great scenario for. It's always sketchy going into spring training with something new and being unsure, whether that's minor league spring training or big league spring training or showing up for your spring season in college. It's always sketchy to just show up.
Absolutely. One of the things that's been interesting about baseball, and I feel like this is like the third time I've had this conversation even today alone, is that baseball is more open-minded than it's ever been before. It's funny. I went to like a Cubs-Cardinals game like 2 weeks ago in St. Louis, and pregame, I saw some of our guys on the field. And I talked to Jeff Albert, Ollie Marmol, and then, Thomas, their physical therapist, came out and chatted. Like it's a more cordial relationship than ever before. And then once the game got going, I met up with the director of performance and the assistant strength coach for the Cubs when C-Shack connected us. It's just like that would have happened 5 or 6 years ago. Like the private sector guys were the bad guys. And, nowadays there's, events like Pitchapalooza and Wolf Force events and things like that do tend to bring all these people together outside of it. Have you seen that same kind of thing on the actual skill development side of things? I mean, I see it on strength conditioning, and which is awesome. So
yeah, absolutely. I think when you're in the private sector, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Right? So you can do whatever you want. So you can be innovative. Baseball was not innovative 10 years ago at all.
Yeah.
Compared to now, it was in some regards, but I mean, it is so different now. And it's been actually pretty interesting because 2015 is when I really started getting on radars with teams. And I interviewed with a few teams, and there was never an opportunity that made sense for me to try to jump on. But it's funny how much like things I said in interviews started to show up. And I had been warned multiple times about like, don't say too much. They're going to take your ideas, things like that. Mm-hmm. But you can't blame them for it. If in baseball, players used to be defined. A player was who they were, and the whole concept of redeveloping yourself or becoming somebody different was not feasible. Mm-hmm. And now all of a sudden players were showing up and performing in ways that weren't consistent with who they used to be. So it was a massive value play. So, for a major league team, if you can pay, this is a real scenario, pay a guy $4.5 million and he performs at $70 million according to WAR, like surplus value of $65 million. Yeah, sign me up for that. How do I do that again? How do I get more players to do this? So, for them, it is about the numbers of developing players quickly so they have more control over them, and pay players to perform before they hit free agency. It's just economics at that point. And there's a lot of stuff about like the BP scenarios, and I was shocked then how I would talk to all of my pro guys in 2015. I was like, hey, anybody telling you about spin rates? Like, is anybody talking about spin rates? They're like, no, what's that? Like, they didn't even know. Mm-hmm. I'm like, you realize pitchers, like, this thing is happening, and you're in for a world of pain. Like, this is going to be really bad. And we were trying to develop game plans for how to attack different pitchers with different spin rates, and understanding how outs were happening versus different profiles. And I'm like, nobody from your team is telling you. Like, they're telling the pitchers, but they're not telling the hitters. What are you talking about? Like, we can measure this stuff. You can go out and put a machine on the mound and simulate this. At the very least, like, simulate it. So major league hitters are incredible at making adjustments. So, like, show them what a high spin fastball looks like versus a low spin fastball. Show them what different movements look like. Recreate it, and they're going to do their thing. And it was like, no, nobody's talking about that. And I was like, I was just keeping it to myself. I'm like, oh my god, nobody's saying anything about this. And yeah, so to get back to your question, I think there's way more interest in what the private sector is doing now because it's a gold mine.
Yeah, and
it's an absolute gold mine for them.
And I don't know how you are. Like, we're tremendously open. Like, whoever wants to come and hang out and observe, like, we encourage it. We love it. We welcome them. Running a baseball mentorship in the next couple of days, and we have multiple pro teams and some college crew that are coming. Like, I don't think that it's secretive because, like we talked about earlier, the game evolves so quickly that you're going to have to innovate anyway. It's and I feel like even when you share stuff, a lot of times it doesn't get picked up on or it doesn't get acted on in pro ball, just because the bureaucracy is so big.
Yeah, it's at the time I felt like there was opportunity for competitive advantage, so I was trying to be a little more quiet about it, and now it's just obviously I'm not like the only person that was thinking like that. So the other people were like, hey, let's do this. Because it's logical. It's really just logic. It's like, this is happening. How are we going to deal with it? And then you try to figure it out and brainstorm a little bit and see what you come up with. But hitting has been so reactionary to what is happening in pitching. Mm-hmm. And it's the way it's always going to be because you're reacting to the pitch. So I had done that pitch design and tunnel thing that I sent you the video recently, and it's terrifying what is happening with the pitch design thing is a problem. It is a problem for hitters, but also like just in the game. It's the whole. I don't buy into the whole speed of the game thing, but there's so few balls being put in play now.
Yeah.
That it's boring. It's getting more boring to watch. You can appreciate like really good pitching, but like there's so many strikeouts, and it's hard. It was hard before, and now it's getting even worse. Like guys learning how to throw sliders and cutters, and just like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna throw this pitch into the mix, and learning how to deceive hitters. And then now everybody's doing the hesitation moves, and like, what are we doing? This is bad. This is bad for hitters.
So where do you see hitting going in the next few years? Right. Obviously, we've seen the launch angle revolution. We've seen a lot of changes in that regard. Guys selling out for homers. Like, what's the next 5 years look like for us?
Well, I mean, you kind of have to. You kind of have to sell out. So, I've been saying for a few years. I spoke about this at Palooza a few years ago. You have to. I think hitters are going to have to have. They're going to have different swings and different bats based on who they're facing. So end loaded versus hand loaded, different barrel positions, different setups to compete against different pitchers, because you're going to look at how you perform against certain profiles, and like if what you do naturally doesn't work, like make the adjustment.
Yeah,
you got to do something. You're not just going to stand there and just make outs. And the other factor of this, like the other like reality of this, is pitchers make mistakes. The human element is still there, but I think hitters, different bats, different pitch, different setups, different positioning that they're going to have to use, and the more, in some ways, the more defined pitchers get with their repertoire. So if they throw 4 pitches, and this is how they use them, and this is how they offset them, and how they tunnel, it's going to make hitters have to be their anticipation and their game planning is going to have to really be on point. And when they get the pitch that they're looking for, they're going to have to not miss it. Just the margin of error is going to keep getting smaller.
You listed maintaining the art of hitting as a topic of interest. Dig a little deeper on what you mean with that.
Yeah, just competing, just like ability to hit a ball against a shift. Like, what are we talking? They're giving you the field, and we had. I know you know the Bichettes. Chris and I did a thing with Dante one time, and he's like, you know what? Like, I'm going to take my 2-out hit to right field because I'm going to feel much better about myself tomorrow. Going 0 for 4 versus going 1 for 4. There's an emotional component to that, and that might get your name in the lineup. And now with the name of the lineup might be dependent on the front office saying this is how this hitter hits against this pitcher and historical data and all this stuff, whatever. Tell you what, if you feel confident going into the box, you're going to hit better than if you don't. That's the reality of it. And the ability to compete and the ability to be a tough out, I think it shows up the most in the postseason when you're not facing 5 starters, you're facing 3 starters, and they're all really good. Yeah. And the swing and miss guy doesn't perform as well in that scenario because they're exposable. So making yourself into a more dynamic hitter, being adjustable, not just selling out for the homer. Like, selling out for the homer is going to get you paid, but I don't know if it's going to win you a championship.
Yeah, well, it is and it isn't. Nowadays, we've got a lot of guys who hit 30 homers that are sitting in
That's
AAA
true.
without
That's
jobs.
True.
So everybody hits 30 homers now. So to that end, what are the core hitting concepts that don't change over time? What are the things that everybody has to do well to be successful at high school, collegiate, professional?
Yeah, this is kind of the nuts and bolts of how we program our hitters. And I gotta shout out Brian Eisenberg. He's been a mentor and a friend of me for the last, 5 years now. He's online marketing guru.
He's a regular podcast listener.
He's been tremendous to me and my life and my family. But he did a book on Amazon called Be Like Amazon. And in that book, he talked about how Amazon focuses on things that won't change. And like the 3 easy things. And there's videos of Jeff Bezos talking about this, but it's lower prices, better selection, and faster delivery. It's like so simple. Like just be the best at those things, right? Better prices, faster delivery, more selection. Great. So when you think about, like, you could apply this to strength and conditioning. Like, what are the things that mean the most? What things will never change? So for hitters, we talk like hitting the ball hard is always going to be good. I think that's irrefutable. There's like the whole donut where if you hit a blooper, it's a hit very frequently, but you're never going to play to your strength. You're not going to play to your weakness. You want to play to your strength. So hitting the ball hard is meaningful. Being on time is meaningful. Ability to compete is meaningful. So things like that, that's where we focus our efforts. Being accurate, like just being accurate. Can you hit a line drive when you need to and not miss pitches? Those are the types of things that when we build our programming now, we really focus on that type of stuff so that we're always working on things that matter and not doing this fluffy stuff that looks cool, or you saw an Instagram post of something. Like, who cares? Like, is it going to help you do the things that get you on the field and winning?
Absolutely. Now, here's a question for you. Like, who do you enjoy watching? You know, I know you watch thousands of hours of video every year. So who are the guys that you find yourself at the big league level coming back to over and over and over again as, you know, swings where you draw? I mean, I know, like, when we talk pitching, like, we look at a lot of Zach Greinke stuff, like smaller guy, pretty durable, pitched at a high level, insane pitch mix. Like, are there guys like that for you?
Yeah. Votto is one I always go back to. Cabrera. I have a folder on my computer of all my gifts, and I just whenever I see something that's intriguing to me, I'll just go through the whole thing. I'll have 50 videos open at once, and I'll just go through. But Bonds, you got to look at Pulse. If you ever think something's happening in the swing, you have to reference it against those guys, because so many things that happen. It's like what is the thing about time as a flat circle or something like that, where it's like we keep coming back to the same stuff that doesn't matter. Like there's one recurring theme about the shoulder plane in the swing and how the bat matches with the shoulder plane. That happens regardless of how you swing. Like, it has nothing to do with mechanics, has nothing to do with efficiency. It's just, that's like, I stopped doing it, but I used to be like, hey, show me an example of this not being true. And regardless of who the hitter is, it's always there. So it's not important to look at. It's just you're wasting your time. So you have to learn how to filter this stuff and drill down to the important pieces, because there's so many things you can look at. I mean, I've been very intently studying hitting and video for 10 years, and I'm still finding things that are interesting and new. Like, despite like thousands and thousands of hours of study, it's just crazy to me. But there's still things there. There's still elements there's still nuance. There's still little tiny details that can, you might find one phrase that helps a hitter, and that's important.
Now, who are like the young players in the game where you look at it and you say, all right, this guy could be a superstar? You know, are there players out there where you see they're close?
There's a lot of young talent. There's a lot of young talent in the game right now. The kid with the Braves, I'm going to blank on his name right now, but I just did an article about him. Acuna is very good, but even the other guy, Riley, that just came up, I just did an article on him. It's crazy to me how many guys are so young and producing. Like the Alonso. If Kevin McGowan's listening, he told me about Pete Alonso a couple years ago, and he's like, dude, this guy's unreal. Mm-hmm. He told me the same thing about Conforto. So, like, ask the players who the good hitters are. I think they might be better than the scouts, because they know they're on the field. They know who they pay attention to. But there's a ton, like even like a Cody Bellinger's. He's a puppy, and he's doing damage. But there's a lot of young talent. The White Sox are very fun to watch right now. They've got a ton of talent. There's a ton of young guys that are interesting to watch, and just really good athletes. Really, who's the kid that is it? Alvarez with Houston that just came up. He hit like 20-something homers in AAA, and his swing's good. I like his swing a lot.
Absolutely. So I asked you this question probably 7 or 8 years ago. I think it was in Nashville, maybe when you and Kyle and I were eating Chipotle or something. But if you could work with one guy in pro ball, who would it be? Who's the guy you feel like you can help the most?
I might be ready for another hot take number 2.
I remember the old one. I'm curious.
Yeah, the old one was. The old one should have been Jason Hayward.
It was 1,000% Jason Hayward. I didn't even finish my question before you answered it.
Honestly, at this point, I'm not even really pursuing pro clients at this point. So
there you go.
The pro world is very interesting, and
that's right.
I have an almost 2-year-old, and my wife's pregnant. So depending on when this airs, number 2 is coming out very soon.
Congratulations. Good luck.
Well, you did it the hard way. You did 2, then 1. So.
Actually, 1 then 2 is the hard way. 2 then 1 is easier.
It? Well,
yeah. Once you've had twins,
all right,
easy.
that's fair. That's fair.
Knock on wood.
I would. I want to say this. I would work with somebody who wants to work with me.
That's a great answer. That's very PC.
Well, it's the truth, because those are the guys that are the best to work with, and I don't.
Yeah.
I got exposed to a lot of stuff on the pro side of the game, and working with pro guys is fun and it's exciting. And when your name gets attached to somebody, it's like a rush. It's cool. But I'm way more interested in building relationships with people and helping them long term.
Yeah.
And for a bit there, things got transactional, where like people wanted to come to me because like they wanted to make more money, or it was more about the results than the process. And that wasn't as enjoyable for me. So I would want to work with somebody that wants to learn, that wants to be. And Chris and I always say it's a lifestyle. Like it's who you are. It's ingrained in what you are as a person, that you're trying to get better and you want to continuously learn. So if there's somebody like that,
I like that, man. You're an average of the people you hang out with, So if you got guys that are there for the right reasons, it's going to make you a better person. So here's an interesting question. So we obviously talked about the hitters you like to watch. What resources do you look to? Do you read a lot outside of the hitting world? What's the stuff that's on your bookshelf or that you're watching online?
That's a question I wanted to ask you. You're working through my list of questions I wanted to ask you. I like it. Man, I look at in a lot of places. I look at a lot of golf stuff. There's a ton of really good movement people on Instagram. Like they just throw up a quick exercise and it's like, all right, I can see how that could apply. My thing is I always look at things through the lens of hitting. So when I watch something, I'm seeing the thousands of clips that I've seen in my lifetime and how it would apply to that. So I do read a lot of books. I read a lot of articles that I find through Twitter, things that interest me. The golf stuff's pretty interesting because they're typically ahead of us because there's just the money situation with who plays golf versus baseball. But I think that's kind of catching up too. I read a lot of pitching stuff. I read a lot of pitching stuff. I study a lot of pitching video. What do I have next to me? I've got. I'm currently doing the MVP machine, which is interesting because I feel like I'm listening to my life a little bit. I'm pulling up Audible. I want to see what I did recently. Power of Moments. I read a lot of business books.
Yeah.
A lot of business books.
Especially on audio books.
Yeah. I got to do Audible. Range is on my list. I have it downloaded.
I've had multiple people mention that to me today. I'm doing Why We Sleep right now, which is a classic one.
Why We Sleep. Do they know? Did they figure it out?
Yeah. Basically, it keeps you from dying way too early. That's the cliff notes. There's about 13 hours that you should cover, though. So
there you go. How about hot take number 3 on that? So the whole concept of like data and like trusting the data and using computers. I think our brains are we need to trust our brains as baseball players and our ability to process things very, very quickly and be dynamic. Like we want to rely on the computers process certain data better. What book was that I was reading? But I think it's not even instincts, but just trusting what we see in front of us in moments versus there was a story of a guy, I think it was Cliff Pennington. He got brought in to pinch hit one time, and his numbers for a guy, he was like 2 for 4 off a guy, but it was when he was a starter versus a reliever. So he like pinched hit in a high leverage situation, and like the guy used to throw like 92, 93, but he was throwing 97, 98. Like, and it was like a totally different thing, but they're like, oh, they checked the chart and it said he hit good against this guy. So it's like things like that where you have to, computers are really, really good, but our brains are really, really good computers. So
I like it. All right, so we're about 50 minutes in. I want to hear, you got a new project in the works, and you can say a little, but you can't say too much.
Well,
so
yeah.
I'll let you take the floor. Tell me what you got in the works and how you're going to change the world.
Oh man. So yeah, the current project is trying to make this data meaningful and being able to deliver a better customer experience to athletes, which is probably the most boring way to explain what I'm doing. I'm custom building software. I'm an idiot. If Kyle is lit from Drivelines listening to this, yeah, I'm an idiot. Building it myself, which is ridiculous. But essentially, a couple years ago, I ran into a bunch of problems from a business standpoint with supply and demand, where I realized I felt an inability to deliver to customers because there was too much. I had too many customers, which sounds weird to say, but I wasn't equipped for it. And a big reason I wasn't equipped for it was I didn't have the right tools to handle what was happening, and inability to process things. And I was like trying to do this stuff with Google Sheets and Excel and emailing PDFs, and it was just a mess. So started down a path trying to build a better solution, and it's been pretty cool. It's we're using it locally at my facility here in New Hampshire, and we have a True Grind in Austin, Texas is a, I don't know if we would call it a partner facility or affiliate, or we'll call it partner facility, but all their hitters are on the program right now. And it's basically we're able to deliver better programs that are data driven, and we can track things a lot easier and allow hitters to essentially see how this data is related to everything that they're doing. And there's a lot of data that we're capturing that is very subjective, so it's user reported stuff, but it's making it the primary goal is to drive behavioral change, so they know cause and effect of what they're doing and how to make improvements faster. So it's been really interesting, and that's my way of trying to say stuff without saying too much, because it's not really. We're trying to we have some people that are interested in becoming partners, and we're going to be pursuing that. But ultimately, we're trying to be as athlete centric as possible, meaning we want the athlete to be the most important part of this whole process and be able to make good decisions about their careers as quickly as possible, and be able to track their progress. Absolutely. Because there's so much data that they're trying to handle and understand, and the kids don't understand it, and the parents don't understand it, and it's a problem. So we're trying to help people understand how to get better. And there's one of my favorite thing about our summer program is we're doing this email program with it. So literally for 56 straight days, they're getting emails that relate to their programs, and it links up to data, it links up to their data, how their data relates to other people's data, different articles that have been written in the past. And it's just,
so it's a curriculum.
It's a curriculum. And it takes a lot of work to put stuff like that together. So you were mentioning your intern program, building stuff out like that. It requires a lot of planning and a lot of thought and a lot of time and energy to build stuff like that. So I have a very, very high appreciation for what that means. And you're right. Those kids have no idea how easy they have it now. Because it's yeah.
Well, the good news is we have lots of time to get reading in, because usually you spend a good chunk of your day just holding a baby while they scream.
Mm-hmm.
So you can throw one headphone in or hold a book in the opposite hand and get some work done. So you're in good company. So we're gonna wrap up. But first, folks can find you on Twitter. It's at Tewks Hitting, TEWKS Hitting. Same thing for Instagram. Is hittingdaily.com the best bet for them to find you online?
Hittingdaily.com is the subscription site. Tewkshitting.com is that's where my books are and some blogs. And then the new project is projectth.com, which is kind of a project name for now. But Project TH got to capitalize on the brand a little bit. Use the logo.
I like it, and I'm sure it'll be great. Everything I've seen of your stuff has been outstanding.
I appreciate that.
Everybody definitely check him out, and you can give some love on social media. So really appreciate you taking the time, man, and best of luck with the new baby.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
You got it.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd be thrilled if you'd consider subscribing to the podcast and leaving us a review to read on iTunes. We welcome your suggestions for future guests and questions. Just email elitebaseballpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for your continued support, and we'll see you next episode.